Alright, so I did my presentation on maternal depression in multi-generational households. This is my SBT, and I'm Nick, so let's go. So to start off with, some background on multi-generational households, MGHs from here on out, so I can save you some time, save you some breath. This country is in a time of transition. As we see from 71 to 2021, the amount of MGHs has quadrupled during that period. And there's many reasons for this, and we can do a cost-benefit analysis to figure out why. Uh, each individual family is doing it. So whether or not it's elders moving in with children, boomerang kids like just graduated from college wanting to move back in and save up, or the one I chose, which is single mothers moving in back with their parents. And so we'll do that now. Amongst that situation, there's a turbulence of identity within America. So as we have these new ideologies and perspectives taking over and taking root and growing, there's also the feelings of what's originally were planted, which was these ideas of independence and self-reliance within parents. And so some of the article spoke about this ambivalent feeling of whether am I supporting or am I enabling? Am I actually hurting my children, or is this the right thing to do within parents? So there's this need to find new footing as we grow and adapt within our culture. And beyond that social implication and aspect of push and pull pressure, there's political and economic issues that deal with that are impacting single motherhood. And a lot of the articles talked about economic reasons, and this is just one example of the Personal Responsibility of Work and Opportunity Reconciliation Act. Say that 10 times fast, of 96, which required single mothers to be living with a responsible guardian or an adult, which typically was their parents, in order to receive benefits, right? And so although that's a good thing, a lot of hardline Republicans would probably take this as like an aspect of the welfare state, which is it's enabling and increasing aspects of dependence rather than trying to foster independence. So just some of the issues to be aware of about just the backdrop as we move into maternal depression and MGHs. Now, I really wanted to focus on MGHs in general, but that seemed too broad to explore just the dynamics of the different types of things happening within those families. So I really honed in on this one aspect. Now, there weren't a lot of articles on MGHs in general, and there was even less on single mothers. But one study that I did find was by Piontek, excuse me, that really focused on depressive symptoms. And that's probably why I chose this as like the main focus here, which use the DSM-5 characteristics like helplessness, hopelessness, dysphoric mood, 2 weeks, etc., etc. It really focused on marital status, time spent in MGHs, and race. We'll get to race later, but some of the things that came up from this article and others were just, first off, within the family, the dynamics of power and control over your space, privacy, and also the boundaries / navigating the roles that can generate conflict. That was a constant thing that came up from these articles. And also, within the mother, just feelings of inadequacy and helplessness of the reality of your situation, like whether or not I can do anything about it. Where's my agency? So those are some aspects that we're going to cover. And why focus on single mothers? Well, this U.S. Census Bureau pointed out 20% of all single-parent households are male, so which leaves 80% female. So this is a hugely single mother issue that we're dealing with here. And then the urgency of it is that for MGHs and young mothers and MGHs over 5 years are higher risk for poor parenting outcomes, lower educational and vocational attainment, grandmother stress, and poor childhood development. Now, we can get into like chicken or the egg, what's causing what in that situation, but there's still an association to be aware of there. So for part one of Power and Control, where we're navigating the shared space and privacy, well, this interesting article by Easton Hope really pointed out the difference in ideology of feeling at home and then living in a house. And as Piontek points out, who moves in with who is an important distinction there. And typically, grandparents are more established economically, so single mothers move in with them, right? And within that parameter and that situation comes this underlying image about I'm moving in with mom and dad. I'm not on my own, right? So and there's this, Easton Hope also pointed out this tendency to treat each family as MGHs as cohesive units when different aspects of ownership and control over the dwelling you live in creates a vastly different lived experience. And as Giddens talks about, it's this term ontological security, which is your ability to express yourself and to have your external space reflect your inner identity. is hugely important when it comes to not only feelings of inner peace, comfort, but also safety, right? So whether or not you actually have actual control over your dwelling, or you perceive that you don't, um, that aspect is associated with better overall mental health, right? And so if you don't feel like you have any autonomy or agency over the issue you're in, it's the same reason why, limiting autonomy. And I don't want to make vastly generalizing statements here, but limiting autonomy of people that are locked up or in prison, it's not a good mental exercise to do. You're more likely to be stressed out. You're more likely to feel symptoms of stress. You're more likely to be a little bit angry. You're more likely to have symptoms of depression. So beyond that, on the other side of that is just when you have more people in a space, there's less privacy overall, right? So you have no not as much access just to be able to be by yourself or discharge your own negative emotions. And just being around people, try to spend time around someone for an extended period of time. Go on a road trip with people that you know kind of well. Friction happens. It just can happen. Just please, I just want to go to the living room and have no one there. I just want to be in the kitchen, no one there. These things seem to keep coming up in these articles. So other aspects that have to be oh, and yeah, so when that happens, people are more likely that are feeling those tensions and stress are spend more time in their own room, right? So now you have this isolated effect again, not good for mental health or symptoms of depression. And a little note down there by Livingston is that single men don't really have to wrestle with the struggle as much because single fathers usually financially in a better position, keep their own space, and they have help on the weekends or whatever. So again, predominantly a single motherhood issue. Now the more abstract concept of just the boundaries and roles within the structure that creates your own identity. When the children move back in, grandparents still see their roles as parents, even though children want that role reversal. And so, as pointed out in a few of these articles, the mother-grandmother relationship is a high. It's a relationship of high support, but also high conflict and possibly of stress, especially around discipline and child-rearing decisions. And again, I don't want to just be blaming the grandmother here, but a lot of in our culture, a lot of parenting decisions of discipline are still being put on mothers rather than fathers. So this could be grandfathers, but the article seemed to mention grandmothers in general. So take this with a grain of salt. But when you have overstepping grandmothers that are making these decisions for young mothers, there's just the conflict that can happen, just like the bickering between those two, but the content's different than the process, right? So the process underlying, me telling you what you should be doing as a good mother is that I don't trust you as a mother. I feel like you're inadequate, right? And so those kind of communications start to weigh on the identity of the single mother, creating, not only stress, but feelings of inferiority, and emotional isolation, as well as the physical isolation that can happen, as you've seen when you're around two people for too long. So again, being able to establish the roles hugely important, and we'll get to solutions in a little bit. But and also just one thing to mention is just like negative comments from just people that are perceived as more authoritative than you. It's not good for your psyche. Like you're just, let's say you're again in the kitchen, and offhand comments be like, well, you should have done that, or they're doing a lot of this lately. It's like, well, Jesus, I'm excuse me, sorry, geez Louise, I just need a moment just to like encouragement, right? So these are just some of the issues that can arise in some of these dynamic structures. Now, multicultural considerations. Here we go. So, maternal depression was highly dependent on the cultural group that the individual families and the individuals belong to. Now, collectivist approach to parenting and to living is more accepted amongst minority populations. So your African American population, Hispanic and Latino, Asian and other Eastern collectivist cultures, where the idea of extended kinship groups are more accepted and more seen as a sign of strength and internal identity, where you accept and endorse shared responsibility. And so what was seen is in Piontek's 2016 study, which was Caucasian individuals at MDHS had higher levels across the board of symptoms of depression than other racial and ethnic communities. Now we can say that this kinship extension from diverse cultures came out of necessity, and whether you want to say it, the fact is that it's there and it's more accepted in those populations. Now, so from the interview, I was about to say, like, we're about at the interview, aren't we? one thing that was reiterated from the interviews was that not everyone in this family is having the same experience. So there's personal struggles, excuse me, English, and also shared struggles. Now the family itself is dealing with the shared struggle of the situation of the single mother being back in and having to navigate that, and what should we do, what's the best possible route forward. But within each individual, I noticed that there was other things weighing on them. That was another one of their major, like if each character in a story you interviewed, they had their own thing going on. So the young mother has, they have their identity tied to the family, but also they really want to be able to feel like a success, or just being able to provide for their children and have that taken care of, especially like they know they're not going to be able to live there forever, or their parents aren't going to be around forever, right? So there's this feeling of uncertainty around surrounding that. The grandmother was wrestling in this. Oh, so excuse me, I should have mentioned that too. The family I mentioned that I interviewed was a Mexican American family, friends of my family, and so it was a pretty quick little drive over there. But yeah, so they're really highly collective and really dependent on each other. Um, Now, I don't know if I'll let them see this, but there is a high level of enmeshment that happens in some of these families, at least as we'll get to later, how I view it. But so let's keep going. So the grandfather was torn between, maybe retiring or keep working because he wants to really be there for his family too. And so I can just keep going down there. But yeah, everyone had their own experiences, own things they're working on. The other part of it that I learned from this family is that there's a lot of good times. I mean, some of the research I focused on was just negativity and like things that were going wrong. When I would come across like the benefits, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I get it. But I was totally just sidestepping all those things. So there's a lot of moments of happiness and laughter, in this family in particular, how they just live life and how they negotiate with troubles, right? So they used humor to kind of battle back some of the seriousnesses of life. There's a lot of connections seem to be being made, especially across generations. And they have their great grandmother living with them as well. So it's 4 generations in this household. So there's less worry about their great grandmother being lost or like getting hurt, falling down. They can be there. There's also the economic benefit they talked about. But again, they saw that family as a sense of strength and a positive thing. So that was good to be reminded of. In comparison, my family is Hispanic, but we're a little more acculturated to like the dominant cultural narrative of Western ideology, right? So we still use humor a lot to deal with issues, and we have an idea of extended kinship. Like when I was in high school, my grandma and grandpa moved in with us, and it was fun. But and yeah, kids were still allowed to be kids up until like a certain point, like 11, 12, 13, and we had to really start thinking about contributing to the family in different ways. But some differences is that we were a little bit more independent and had a little more boundaries. So, for example, later on, after I graduated high school, uh, my grandfather passed. My grandmother moved in with my aunt, and rather than living in her house, they had a separate little dwelling built behind the house, and so there's a little bit more of that kind of structure surrounding my extended family. Obviously, it wasn't within my family, but that's just kind of like the underlying tone is like we should have a little bit of separation here. And again, so how that makes me view this family is like it seems like some of the boundaries are a little too diffused, and it's possibly creating some enmeshment, especially as even though we have grandma and grandpa on top here, and then under them, the single mother, and then under them the children, the diffused relationships can easily see where the children could start having impacts on grandma and grandpa, who are supposed to be like the leaders of the household. So that's just something I would be aware of, but also that it's my perspective and upbringing that's making me think that. Are there any concepts to cover? So family value seems to be huge for this particular family that I interviewed. They're always there for each other. God's above all else. Atmosphere is always fun over serious. That's how we handle tension. So there's feelings of cooperation, horizontal communication. Everyone's on equal footing here. Community feeling, social embeddedness. We're all in this together. Holism. It's again, you can't separate us from one part from the whole. And they really focus on the opposite of isolation, right, which is inclusion. Um, I put birth order and finding a place for myself because amongst the children, they're all still finding their footing. I think they all have kind of a solidified version of who they kind of want to be in the family, but everyone's looking for their place, and it seemed like kind of like not a free for all, but just there was a lot of placeable exploration. Let's put it that way. Gender guidelines. This family still had traditional roles where mothers are the homemakers and in charge of discipline decisions. Fathers are the main providers, even though the females or the women in this family also contributed economically too. And then also feelings of inferiority, which were, seem to be constantly coming up within single motherhood and issues surrounding that with discouragement and also overburdening situations like being divorced or having children out of wedlock. Use of education and encouragement. I think encouragement is huge, and this gets into our uh, solutions here. So within a family, it's really important to have collaboratively, I said that right, defined roles and areas of shared authority. So like who's doing what, who in the household decisions, who's contributing what financially, what are we going to do? Are we going to renovate? What are we doing here? Is there smoking, etc., etc. Effective, open, and positive communication and layering right there, and then knowing how to share the space and have moments of privacy to respect each other's boundaries there. Um, and one thing that I think needs to be really fostered in these types of families, especially mitigating aspects of isolation, inferiority feelings, and hopelessness within single mothers, is developing their skills and also their ability to establish future autonomy, right? And within doing those two things, you can generate hope and confidence in her ability to go off and you know, sustain on her own. And then on an economic or political level, um, advocating for more services for single mothers that foster independence rather than dependence would be good. But again, as I put in the bottom, more research needed on MGHs in general and its effects on mental health and the different types of families that get established as we learn more and more and it becomes more accepted in America. There's references one, references two. I know a lot of references. Oh, I swear I looked at every one of these. No, I did. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening and have a good day.